sense. Also, he is the chief scientist of the Israeli startup video sites. We would like to welcome him to Mexico and the SIG in a virtual way, of course. You are most welcome, Dr. Bronstein, and I shall give you the floor, please, Doctor.
Thank you, Jose, and it's my honor and it's my pleasure to be here. Actually, I've never been to Mexico, but at least virtually, this is my first time. So I would like to talk today about how we can approach different imaging tasks in the age where we have quite a lot of compute power in our hands, and also we have very powerful modern machine learning tools. So basically, how these two the convergence of these two ingredients, how it allows us to design better cameras, better imaging systems in general. So again, I will show you a presentation without equations, not even a single equation. I will be completely non-technical as much as I can, and I will give you a few references to papers. If you're interested in the details, I will show you one concept and a few embodiments of this concept in different scenarios and different imaging systems. I hope I will have time to show a few of the recent works as well. And of course, I will be happy to answer questions. So let's start with basically what we have between our ears. We have about 3 kilograms of gray matter, and a very considerable part of that gray matter is dedicated to vision. Basically, this is how we perceive the world. We humans and many other primates, they perceive the world predominantly through vision. And a very big part of the human brain cortex is actually dedicated to processing visual signals, to processing images. And actually, this has been how we communicated forever. Before we invented writing, before we invented history, this painting is almost 40,000 years old, and it actually tells a story, a visual story, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. But creating this picture is a very difficult process, right? It probably took many hours to those prehistoric painters to paint these animals, and one of the goals of human beings was to capture the visual world. And I'm sure you all know this device. This is camera obscura. This is probably the first imaging device that humanity has ever built. It was very popular in Europe around the 18th century, but it was probably invented way before, and it was known to the Greek and to the Chinese more than 2,000 years back. And actually, bad tongues say that some painters like Vermeer, most notably, was using camera obscura to paint his paintings, which are very known for their exactness, for their photography-like exactness in shading and shadows and perspective and geometry. But of course, a very big milestone in the imaging technology was making the image persistent. And it was the invention of the photographic process, probably by chance, around 200 years ago. So that was, of course, a revolution because it made the image persistent. It made of course, it had huge implications on art and on many other industries and domains of our social life. So it looks like, if you look at the devices we have today, so I have, for example, this device, it's a marvel of technology. It's really a marvel of engineering and technology. It's cutting edge sensors and digital image processing hardware and optics. But so it looks like we did really a huge leap in the past, let's say, 100 years building cameras. But if you look conceptually into what is inside this camera obscura, it's a very similar design. So basically what you have a piece of optics, an objective lens that collects light from the world. it was just a pinhole lens in the camera obscura. We have slightly more sophisticated lenses nowadays. Instead of a screen on which the painter would paint his picture, now we have a sensor, a digital sensor. It's a collection of pixels, an array of pixels that converts light into a digital image. And then we show it on the phone's display to a human observer, and we like the image of our cat or our child or just a selfie of ourselves. But this is how conventional imaging works, right? What the sensor receives is more or less what we see. But nowadays we have a lot of processing power that is available to us, but practically free of charge. So if we put this computational power to work, we can actually process the image, process this digitized signal in the digital domain, and it appears to be very convenient. We can do very advanced stuff in that domain. So what we can do, we can actually put more processing power here and get slightly crazier with the optics and with the sensors that we use. So we can build such imaging systems in which the image, the raw image that the sensor senses, is not directly intelligible, or maybe seems broken or somehow degraded, and we need some digital image processing, some computational process that will recover a nicely looking image. But in exchange, we might get either a more efficient camera, or maybe we can do imaging of some additional features that are impossible in a different way. And basically, this brings the idea of computational imaging. And it's not something that has been invented recently. It is actually a relatively old idea. So what you see here is actually, it's amazing. This is the working lab prototype of the first CT scanner, dating back to the beginning of the 70s, 50 years ago. One of the rare cases where the Nobel Prize went to engineers, because obviously of a very important implications of this device. This is the first CT image. It took 5 hours on the computers back then to reconstruct this image. And if you look at the raw data that the sensors receive, you will just see a collection of curves, nothing intelligible. So you needed a reconstruction process to transform those dots into an image that a human doctor can interpret, like in this case. Basically, many other imaging modalities, medical imaging modalities in particular, are computational imaging modalities. So I will show you a few examples with ultrasound and MRI. Okay, so now it becomes interesting when the consumer of the image is not a human. But today we have many applications where the cameras are not connected to our eyes via screen, but are connected to some machine intelligence algorithm that makes decisions, or it tries to interpret the image. For example, we have an autonomous car. The perception system of an autonomous car includes different imaging modalities, including cameras that work in the visible light. And it would be actually probably not very useful or even harmful to put a human in the loop. We need some computer vision algorithm that responds to dangers or detects what is happening on the road. And there are numerous examples. So we have more and more machine vision algorithms that are the consumers of the image. And then if this is the case, are our imaging systems constructed in the best possible way for these users? And maybe we can ask even in extreme cases. If the only thing I need to do is to detect whether there is a pedestrian in front of me, do I need an image at all? Do I need a human interpretable image at all? Maybe I can compute something else, and then a machine intelligence algorithm will be able to interpret that image, but the human will be completely ignorant about what happens inside. And actually, most likely, if you look at what happens inside our brain, the internal representations of the visual signals, they are likely to be completely unintelligible as well. So basically, what we could do, the next thing we could do is to learn that, to learn this entire system, to learn, of course, the digital part of digital parts are easy to learn. Today's most prominent methods, of course, are based on deep learning. So you can learn some image reconstruction or some image processing algorithms. For example, we tried to do an entire image processing pipeline in a camera entirely by learning without anything built from the first principles. But you can also learn the design of the hardware of this system. You can learn the hardware, the electronics of the sensor. You can learn the optics of your imaging system, and you can actually learn it in concert with the algorithm that will interpret the image. So basically, in this way, we learn to build the camera design together with something that will solve some downstream task, some end task for which the image is required. And it is likely that our brains and our eyes also evolved in this way. We cannot know for sure; it's very difficult to tell. But it's not a completely inappropriate idea, right? So we can try to imitate this process. We can learn this entire processing pipeline to learn how to see, how to perceive, in a way that is optimal for a specific end task. So let me show you a concrete example. I will show you more concrete examples in the next slides. So if you take this device, you see the camera is the thickest part of this phone, and actually this camera is more or less the feature that sells it. That's why people buy smartphones. They became our intimate companions. They changed the way we interact through digital photography. But there is a constant drive to make this device smaller and thinner, right? And the quality of the image also needs to grow. So the number of the pixels in the array grows. This camera has 12 megapixels. The size, the thickness of the camera also shrinks. And at some point, we start hitting physical limits, right? If a pixel has a certain area that shrinks all the time, we are today talking about micron and sub-micron pixel pitches, then at some point it will not see enough photons to produce a high-quality image. So one way we could improve the light efficiency of a camera is you see this hole where the light enters the camera, we can make it larger. If we do this, what will happen is that the camera will suffer from what is called a narrow depth of field. So if we focus this camera on an object somewhere in the middle of our scene, an object that comes closer will be blurred, and an object that is farther away will also be blurred. Okay, so like short-sightedness and far-sightedness of our eyes. So the camera will be in focus on some range of depths that is called the depth of field of the camera. And the bigger is the aperture, compared to the focal length of the lens, the more narrow is the depth of field. But of course, in exchange, we get better light efficiency. So basically, the problem we tried to address is how can we build a camera that has the light efficiency of a big aperture and the depth of field of a small aperture. So basically, how to do this extended depth of field imaging. What we did, we created a new optical element, which is a phase mask. So the phase mask manipulates the phase of the incoming wave front in a way that is dependent on the wavelength. So basically what it does, it focuses different colors at different depths. So suppose in this image, the red will be focused near the lens, the green will be focused at some mid-ranges, and the blue will be focused at farther distance. So when you look at this image, it will look weirdly blurred. So it doesn't look like a good image. It's actually very, very corrupt. But one of the chromatic channels is always in focus. It's always sharp. And you need a computational process to recover that sharpness and apply it to all the chromatic channels and get, as a result, a sharp image. So basically, what we did is we learned together. We learn a reconstruction algorithm that gets this weirdly blurred image and produces a sharp image, but we also did it in concert with learning this phase mask itself. And actually, learning the phase mask itself improved the quality of the reconstructed image by a very substantial amount. So this is what a regular camera sees. This is just a clear aperture with the same lens, and this is the lens with the introduced phase mask, plus the digital processing algorithm that recovers the sharp image from the mask. And it has about twice better MTF. with the rest of the settings kept the same, and because this is a phase mask, it has negligible impact on the light efficiency of the camera. Okay. And if you're curious, this is how the mask looks like. Actually, this vertical dimension here is hugely exaggerated. This feature is a few micron high. So basically, these rings, it is etched in glass, and these rings actually they manipulate the face, and this is how it looks like. Again, it's not an industrial prototype. In a real camera, you would, of course, manufacture it together with one of the surfaces by coating or injection molding or some of the real industrial techniques. Another interesting observation here is that the way the three color channels are blurred one relative to the other depends on the depth. So at short depths, the blue will be blurred more compared to the red, and at large depths, it will be the other way around. So if we can analyze this blur, we can actually calculate depth at every pixel. And this is another task, basically creating a depth image. So we can learn a different algorithm that will be optimized for this task, and we can actually build a bet that is specially attuned to that task. This is what we get. It's hard to compare this to other depth imaging devices. So basically, first of all, what we have here is a single shot, single aperture, completely passive depth imaging system. The quality of the depth here, of course, doesn't come close to any of the active systems that project light into the scene, but of course, it's a completely different category to compete in. But it comes close to what we can get from light field cameras that have much bigger apertures and much costlier optics. So I think it's a very good result. Actually, this paper won the OSA Grand Challenge competition for optical systems of the future. And of course, we can extend this principle, this concept to many other imaging modalities and many other imaging systems. And especially it is interesting in active imaging systems, where we transmit some energy into the scene, into the object that we would like to image, and because then we have more degrees of freedom to learn, because we can also shape what we are transmitting. So let me show you a few examples of other imaging modality that we looked at. So let's start with, I'm sure you all watched this movie 15 years ago, when it was released in 2006, Planet Earth. It was the most expensive documentary ever shot. BBC spent $25 million on that in about 5 years of shooting. This is how it was captured, some of the scenes. They had military-grade airborne stabilized cameras with helicopters. You can imagine the cost of this operation. This is how you do it today. I'm sure everyone here played with this. This device costs slightly over $1,000. And it has a camera, it has a very good camera, actually better than what we had back then, 4K. And it's really a revolution, really a revolution. You can take breathtaking videos and images with these drones. But if you look at the construction of this drone, you see this little device here. It's a gimbal. It's a mechanically stabilized camera. And it's a problem. The gimbal is a problem because, first of all, it adds considerable amount of weight to the system. It has moving parts. It needs to mechanically actuate a camera, and if the camera is heavy, like for cinematic purposes, it's a pretty bulky device. It weighs a lot. It consumes power because it has motors that need to rotate these 3 axes to stabilize the camera, and it costs money also. So basically, gimbals have very significant system cost. Can we do better? Can we do without a gimbal? So what we try to do is to create a digital gimbal. So we'll try to emulate the digital gimbal with the ungimbaled camera. So what we did, we took a fast camera that can take a rapid sequence of frames, a burst of frames. So the trade-off there is obvious. If you expose the frame for a long time, you get good SNR, basically a low noise image, but a lot of blur because of the motion of the scene and the motion of the platform. For airborne platforms, it's really acute because it moves all the time. And if you take a short exposure, you will get sharp images, but with very low SNR. So basically, what we followed things that exist in the literature. So basically, we first do an image alignment, and we can do it with the neural network. We can learn it, and then once we have the alignment, we can simultaneously solve a denoising and de-blurring problem to combine these aligned images into a final image, and that is also done by learning technique. It works really well. We did some improvements to this standard pipeline, but basically this is it works really well. But what you can do additionally, you can actually, and this is what you get, by the way. You see this is the full exposure at 5 milliseconds. This is one frame in a burst. The burst here has 3 frames, and it is less blurred, but it is noisier. And this is the result of the digital gimbal of alignment, denoising, and de-blurring simultaneously. So I think it works really well. But what we can do further here, we have a degree of freedom that we can control. We can learn the exposure times for the frames in the burst. So for example, we don't necessarily need to take them to take all of them at the same exposure time. We can take a very short exposure that will give us a very sharp image, but it will be very noisy. It will have very sharp edges. And then we can take a blurred image at higher exposure, longer exposure, but it will give us much better SNR. And then we can combine. For example, at the edges, we'll probably prefer to take the edges from the noisy image. And again, this can be learned together. Basically, this is the property of the hardware that we can control, the exposure time. So we can learn these hardware properties together with the image reconstruction algorithm and get better final images. So you can see a comparison here. So this is what you get with the fixed exposures, and this is what you get when you further learn the exposure times. And it gives considerable both perceptual and quantitative improvement in the image quality. Okay, let's switch to another modality, which is an active imaging modality, ultrasound, medical ultrasound. Ultrasound is a very, very convenient modality for inspecting our bodies. First of all, because it's cheap, you can put it to point of care with, I don't know, sub $1K cost for the hardware. It is portable. It doesn't use any harmful radiation. So it's a really convenient modality. The way it works, you typically send RF signals in the range of several megahertz to an array of crystals that oscillate and create an ultrasonic wave. That wave is focused inside the body. It reflects from the transitions in the acoustic impedance in the body, like different tissues, bones, and so on. And then we capture the reflected wave, and we transform it into the image. So the creation of this pulse, essentially we need to create amplitudes and phase delays to focus the beam with that phased array of crystals. This is called transmit beamforming. And on the way back, we also need to do receive beamforming in order to create an image. This is how ultrasound works. And the regular way to acquire an ultrasonic image is by focusing a beam and then sweeping with this beam. This is called B-mode scan, typically. B-mode, C-mode scan. The problem with this single line acquisition technique is that it is slow. And if you need to image fast-moving targets, like, for example, cardiac imaging, this can be prohibitively slow. So we need to do better. And people actually developed methods for doing faster ultrasonic imaging. For example, multi-line acquisition. Multi-line acquisition defocuses the beam and then scans faster because you have wider beam that you can move faster. Or another possibility is called multi-line transmission. In that case, you transmit a comb of pulses, and you sweep with that. And with that, of course, you can also decrease the acquisition time. The problem with these techniques is that multi-line acquisition has low resolution, and it creates a lot of artifacts because of this defocus beam. And multi-line transmission creates low contrast because of these crosstalks and basically a lot of clutter artifacts that are not present in the original image. And you need a lot of skill to be able to interpret this image. So can we do better? And what we try to do is just, again, look at this picture. First of all, we can learn the receive beamformer. So basically all the pipeline that reconstructs the image is done in the digital domain today. So we can learn it. We try to put a neural network there. The neural network needs to be designed, of course, in a way that is aware of how the image is formed. But basically, this is a very easy task. And we get actually much higher quality of the image. It's about, let's say, you can scan 3 times faster with the same SNR as single line acquisition. This is if we learn the receive beamforming. But we can also learn the transmit beamforming. So you saw the defocused beam in multi-line acquisition, and you saw the comb beam in the multi-line transmission. But we can actually learn some optimal, some better beam pattern, something that the doctor will probably never configure their ultrasound machine to work with. And we actually observed very weird and interesting and unusual beam patterns. And with that, we actually get better ultrasound quality. When it comes to ultrasound, it's really hard to convince the audience that what they see is a better image. But when you show it to a doctor, they will say, "Oh, but of course this is better because of this, that, and some other properties of the image." But it is objectively and subjectively better compared to the regular acquisition techniques. Basically by learning this receive and transmit beamforming part of the image formation pipeline. Another medical imaging modality that is very, very common, it is costly, but it is the golden standard, at least for anatomic, but also for functional imaging, is magnetic resonant imaging. It is also very convenient because it is not known to cause any harm, because it doesn't use any ionizing radiation. And it is based on a phenomenon that is called nuclear magnetic resonance that was discovered by Elsider Rabe, and he got the Nobel Prize for that. And actually, when he had cancer, he himself underwent MRI imaging, and he's surprised because he never thought that his invention would be put to use so fast. Basically, what happens is that when you place protons in different chemical substances, protons typically comes in the form of hydrogen in molecules, in water, in proteins, and so on. When you place them into a strong magnetic field, they align, their magnetization vectors, their spins align in the direction of the magnetic field. But when you transmit a radio frequency pulse that is attuned to their resonant frequency that depends on the strength of the magnetic field, they change their direction, and when the pulse ceases, they return back to the original state, emitting radiation. They emit radio frequency. Basically, by listening to that radio frequency, we can see how dense are the protons in some region of space. In order to create spatial coding, we vary the strength of the magnetic field by gradient coils. So we create spatial gradient of the field strength. In that way, different locations in space emit different frequencies. And then we do Fourier analysis, of course. So basically, the MRI image is obtained directly in the Fourier domain. And by tuning the strength of the gradient coils, we can traverse the Fourier domain, either in the two-dimensional space or in the three-dimensional space. This is how MRI image is acquired. Essentially, the image is scanned over a trajectory. So basically, the MRI machine is configured with a scan trajectory, and then there is an image reconstruction pipeline that takes that image, essentially does some processing, does the inverse Fourier transform, and we get this nicely looking MRI image of the brain in this case. And people did image reconstruction by data-driven methods, so you can actually learn how to reconstruct the image from the raw data. People also tried to optimize the scan trajectories. There are some works, for example, based on compressed sensing, and actually was quite a revolution in the field of MRI, much more efficient trajectories. But basically, if you learn these two things together, you learn the trajectory and the reconstruction, you can actually get considerable advantage. And what is important is that the gradients are like mechanical systems. The coils that create these magnetic fields, they have inductance. So you cannot change the gradient too fast. It will resist to very sharp changes in the current. And you also cannot feed it with too much current because it will just burn. So there are some physical limitations of how sharp the turns you can make in the Fourier domain, and how fast you can scan on that trajectory. So basically, we would like to learn the trajectory subject to these physical constraints, together with the image reconstruction pipeline. Basically, this is what we are getting. So what you see on the left is a standard radial scan with 16 shots. It's pretty common in MRI. And what you see on the right is the learned trajectory. So you see it is quite different. It was initialized with the radial scan, so it still resembles the radial pattern, but it is different. It traverses the space in a very different way. If you now look at the images that are reconstructed from these trajectories, you can see both subjectively and objectively quite a significant difference. So it's almost 5 dB SNR. It's quite important, and you can also see the image on the right is much more detailed when you use the learned trajectory. And we can have, of course, if we have some other end task, like for example, some automatic diagnosis, or in this case, for example, we want to segment a tumor, you can actually build trajectories that are better for this specific end task, for, in this case, segmentation. So actually, we can create trajectories that are attuned to specific organs, that are attuned to specific tasks, rather than just doing something generic. And I think this is a better way of configuring the MRI machine. Again, all the trajectories respect the hardware limitations. And of course, this can be extended also to 3D. So this is the radial trajectory done in the volume. So in this case, the image is acquired, the three-dimensional image rather than a single two-dimensional slice is acquired at once. Again, there is quite a considerable gain in the acquisition time, with about the same image quality. Okay, another crazy thing that I would like to show you, and I will finish here. A completely different application. There are many uses. Some of them, for example, are quantum computation that require the creation of non-classical light, creating entangled photon pairs with some prescribed statistical characteristics. And the way typically entangled photon pairs are created is by a process that is called spontaneous parametric down conversion, or SPDC. In this process, a nonlinear optical medium, a crystal, is designed in a particular way, and then it is pumped with a laser of a particular shape, with a beam of a particular shape. And as the result comes out entangled light, on which you can measure some correlation, some second-order statistics of the entanglement, for example. The question is how to design such crystals. There have been several works about how to do it. What is currently unsolved is how to do it for 3D structures, with also designing the shape of the pump, the shape of the illumination, of the input light that goes into the crystal. So very recently, we did still an unpublished work we sent just a week ago to a conference in this field, basically showing a very similar approach to what I showed before, that allows to design entangled light with some target characteristics that are specified. So we design both the structure of the crystal and the shape of the illumination. Okay, I think I will stop here. Thank you very much for your attention. I will be very happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Bronstein. I think that your work really is very interesting. When you show the first work where you give the denoising and the blurring of an image taken by a conventional camera using machine learning, I think that the results are very interesting. They are fantastic. And so, you're welcome, Doctor. I think that we have some questions from our audience in the virtual room. So I'm going to read it. The first one would be, which are the software used for this image processing, or code in MATLAB or Python, for example?
For which task specifically? For code for which task? I'm not sure I understood the question.
Okay, they didn't specific a work, but I think that you could answer for the first work, for example, with weirdly blurred image.
So which platform, which software and hardware platform? Well, so at least for prototypes of this type, basically proof of concept, of course, Python is a very I think it's a very good language of choice. First of all, Python is a very good language. It is slow, but it is powerful. And also because it comes with very strong packages like Torch. We use Torch, for example, for learning, that use automatic differentiation, all the goodies for doing deep learning and building some interesting stuff with custom backward steps into the regular deep learning pipeline. So I think Python definitely with Torch or TensorFlow is the method of choice, using GPU both for training and for inference. So, for example, what I showed with the digital gimbal actually runs on an embedded system with the Jetson GPU, close to real time. If you want better performance, if you want better energy footprint, so I did in my labs also some work on porting inference of imaging systems and image processing systems based on deep learning to FPGA. And also ASICs. Basically, there one of the challenges is how to do the computations very efficiently in a quantized way, and also how to minimize the memory transactions, because they are responsible for very significant system costs and energy costs.
Nice, Doctor. So, do you recommend Python and TensorFlow for this kind of work, right?
Well, I guess it's a religious question, but I prefer Torch. I think Torch is at least somehow it seems more convenient to me. But TensorFlow is also a very good package, and definitely Python.
Okay.
Of course.
Okay, very good. We have another question. This is: do you think that echolocation can be another technique to acquire good quality images better than magnetic resonance?
Well, so I'm a very strong believer in ultrasound. So first of all, if you look, for example, at companies like Butterfly that created MEMS-based transducers. So basically, a MEMS-based transducer is an ultrasound system on a chip. So they really allow you to create, for example, 3D ultrasound without any moving parts, with this very dense array of thousands of little MEMS transducers. Now, you need considerable skill to interpret ultrasound images. But if we put sufficiently smart algorithms, when I tried to do this kind of proof of concept, can we get a CT-like image, something that looks like CT or X-ray from an ultrasound? And you can say that it's a very difficult physical modality, and you see different contrast. All this is true, but you see the same organs, and maybe there are some tissue transitions that are not visible in ultrasound and are visible in CT and vice versa. But essentially you can produce an image that looks like CT, so any nurse or any untrained physician can interpret. So I think ultrasound is really the advantage of ultrasound, that you can put it in your pocket. You cannot put an MRI machine into your pocket. So MRI maybe is useful for some high-end functional imaging and things like that, but with ultrasound you can really, what used to be a stethoscope around the neck of every doctor, you can actually replace it with an ultrasound probe. That's a different this is a different game, different ballpark, of course, but you cannot really compare them. But I think ultrasound has a much more potential on benefiting humanity compared to MRI. This is my personal opinion.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And well, when you talk about learning inside to see inside the body, you mentioned that there are different challenges. There are different stages during while the process that the machine learn each step, like learning to scan, learning to entangle light, that you call SPDC. Is it correct?
Yes. Yes.
So there is another question about this work. It is, which measures can be used to validate medically the obtained medical images?
Well, so first of all, in medical imaging is a very conservative field. So of course, and for a good reason, right? Because you better not see something that is not there, or even worse, see something that is there, is not there, right? And the other way around. This domain has been reluctant to accepting data-driven solutions or learning-based solutions because they can create something out of nothing. At least theoretically, this is true. Somehow, however, we forget that even in the classical medical imaging like MRI or CT, there is a lot of signal processing that goes on that is based on models that are plainly wrong, or at least do not completely correspond to reality, right? And they create artifacts. Put some very strong absorbing material into CT, we'll see a lot of rings around it. Same about MRI. Put a piece of metal or something ferromagnetic, or something very small, otherwise it will stick to the magnet, and you will see a lot of artifacts. The thing is that the doctors learn how to live with those artifacts. They learn how to ignore them. And if you now change completely the algorithms, they will create new artifacts that you are less used to. I think it's just a question of time. We'll need to learn how to trust our machines more and basically prove it clinically. Same about automatic diagnosis. In many tasks, computers can do better than humans. Just because the computer can learn from millions of cases, and no doctor can really hold in their head a million of cases of a particular disease. So obviously computers have better, have an unfair advantage in that domain, for at least for sufficiently narrow tasks. So I think this reluctance will eventually cede to accepting more and more machine learning based solutions. And nowadays, for a few years already, FDA approves machine learning based solutions. For example, when one of the companies that I'm participating in, called Embryonics, we work on machine learning solutions for selecting embryos in vitro fertilization processes, and we get about 20-25% improvement compared to human embryologists in the best clinics. So basically, this margin in a field that is very manual today, I think it definitely justifies using a machine learning solution because it improves the entire process. So it's just a question of changing the generation of MDs. The MDs of tomorrow will accept these solutions more readily.
Thanks, Doctor. I think that Israel is a country that really is very good in applications of biomedical engineering. So I think that your work surely will be supported by different institutions. For example, when you are working with databases, do you have support of different institutions like hospitals and so?
Well, so it's a painful question. So getting data, especially medical data, is difficult. So for two reasons. It depends a lot on the domain, and depends a lot on specific institutions. But one is, of course, all the privacy and anonymization requirements, like the GDPR, for example, in Europe, and similar privacy laws regarding medical data. It's very difficult to get anything that is proprietary to the patient, proprietary to the hospital, out of the hospital, because it's sensitive data, very sensitive. It's for a good reason, of course. All these regulations are very strict. But even if there are ways, of course, to overcome that in a compliant way. But the next thing is that hospitals already realized that they are sitting on a golden mine, that these data are worth lots of money. And they are not willing to share the data. If you do it for scientific research, then it is still, it's much easier to get the data. If you do it for commercial purposes, then they want their share. What is interesting is that the patients themselves are not entitled to any royalties or anything for the data that they are leaving at the hospital. So there is some skewness in this legislation. It's not only in Israel; it's the same in Europe and in the United States, and I guess it's more or less the same in the world. So I think it will be interesting also from the legal perspective how things evolve, because I think patients should be entitled to something.
Okay, it is very interesting that you have similar issues like us here in Mexico with a legal perspective about that issue. Doctor, if we visit the website of Vistalab, we can read that their students call their equipped facilities and tools as their toys. So I think that this means that you really enjoy your work, that you work in the lab, and it's very nice for me, and I am sure that for the rest of audience also. So, what would be the process to be part of this lab, Doctor? Are there opportunities to collaborate, such as doing a graduate research or postdocs?
Well, we have basically all of the above. So first of all, we have many collaborators from Europe and the US as well. Basically, now with COVID, let's exclude the past year. It's not representative, but we have visitors. We visit other labs and other research groups very frequently. We have frequently visiting students coming, and also visiting professors coming. We have, of course, postdoc opportunities. Basically, all of the above. And now we are also doing a few very very interesting bioinformatics projects and genetics projects as well. So not only imaging.
Okay, Doctor. Thank you very much. Well, Dr. Bronstein, the last question is about this topic. Here in TIC, there are different research fields such as digital signal processing, artificial intelligence, and many more. So the SIC DSP lab people were interested in your work. We would like to know, why do you think that digital signal processing continues being an important research field for the world in general?
Well, so again, it is difficult. It's difficult to frame what is exactly digital signal processing. So let me take it in the broadest possible context.
Yes, Doctor.
Getting something represented as a digital signal. So digital signal, what does it mean, digital signal? It means that it is sampled on a discrete domain, and it has quantized values. Typically, this is what it means, right? Quite frankly, you cannot do anything else with a regular computer, right? You necessarily need to somehow represent your object of interest with a finite number of degrees of freedom, right? Be it samples or some other type of measurements. And all this is digital signal processing, right? And today's machine learning techniques, like, for example, neural networks, they are all digital systems. They operate in the digital domain. So you cannot really use these techniques without having some minimal notion of digital signal processing. Like, I will give you a trivial example. There was a very influential work of some guy who took very common CNN architectures in deep learning. In CNNs, you typically perform convolutions and then some downsampling. What he said, wait a minute, we do convolution, we do downsampling without any anti-aliasing filtering. It's ABC of digital signal processing, that before you do downsampling, you need anti-aliasing, otherwise you create artifacts. And he tried to apply standard anti-aliasing techniques, which improved consistently the performance of an end task by a considerable amount, really significant amount. So I think we shouldn't forget those fundamentals. We should do things properly. There are so many papers that do things wrong because people don't have time to learn these things properly, and it is important in imaging, in machine learning, in practically anything that has to deal with digital signals, and everything is digital signals.
Yes, Doctor. Thank you for sharing your perspective about this field. So, Doctor, I think that there are not more questions. So, I only need that you stop your presenting, because I'm going to share something. We really thank and appreciate that you shared your work with us. So we would like to recognize your person with this recognition. Second.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Congrats, Doctor.
Thank you.
We really appreciate your time. And
thank you for the invitation, and buen dia.
I hope that this won't be the last time that you share your work with us. You are most welcome here in Mexico.
With pleasure.
So,
thank you.
Congrats, Doctor. Thank you very much.
Bye. Have a nice day.
Goodbye, Doctor.